I wanted to express how I feel about something. I wanted to point something out that I think is really important and does not get called out enough. And it's because of this dangerous sort of attachment to precedents, like previously proven fact. I mean, as an autistic person, I sort of feel like I'm fluid. I sort of put together the pieces of, looking at people who got late diagnosed, right? Looking at people's stories and how there was a certain age where we got missed. And when we got missed, we then began to feel like it was because of us. Something was wrong with us. We didn't get identified. We didn't get the help we needed, so we started to cope, right? And some people went all the way into really, really mal coping. And I bet you there's a lot more people that got lost in that than we even know about. I think this needs to be taken into consideration and questions need to be asked. I'm not going to open up too much about my personal story as of now yet. Hard for me to sort of go into it and whatnot. But what I'll say is that I read this article. And you know what? It's a good article. It was an important article. It was an article about autistic people and how we're more likely to have health problems and sensitivities, and we're actually more likely to have like diabetes. I'll get the article and just sort of read the gist of it. The article was adults with autism at risk for many health problems, and it was a study. And I think it's so important to perform these kind of studies. I don't want to criticize the article. It says here the cancer rates are the same as in the neurotypical population. I'm not surprised by that because cancer isn't really an autistic person's health issue. We more so have issues with the opposite side of the spectrum, the autoimmune disorders, and not so much with cancer per se. So it says like gastrointestinal problems, like metabolic. It says obesity, so metabolic. Could psychiatric stuff like mood disorder and depression. This is all really good information. It's great. The only part that stands out for me is when it says less likely to smoke, use alcohol, drink, do drugs. I don't actually agree with that. I don't. I'll tell you why. Because I think that there's a significant percentage of people who are addicted and out there that became that way because they were autistic kids, Asperger's kids, or kids with something similar like nonverbal learning disorder or severe ADHD that didn't get the proper help that they needed, and may have also come from abusive or difficult childhoods as well, and may have had those influences flown into their face. Aspies get over fire, are mentally hyper, and that's what causes anxiety and have like excess levels of dopamine. Alcohol dumbs that down. So what we know is a lot of people with ADD and stuff have issues, especially with booze. And you can imagine that if Asperger's is kind of almost a severe extension of ADD in a lot of ways, and so is NLD, that there would be a lot of unidentified Aspies that would have picked up from young ages in order to cope with their undiagnosed, unhelped Asperger's syndrome, autism. So I don't believe that. I think that they're relying on precedents. They're less likely to smoke and drink. Well, yeah, when they're diagnosed as kids, either they're diagnosed as kids and the parents are aware that they're socially vulnerable and protect them, or they are of the extreme introvert type of Asperger autistic. Not all autistics and Asperger's are the extreme introvert, though we do get socially overloaded. Many of us are socially motivated. I think what I heard was that it's a third of us are socially motivated. So if you add those two together, socially motivated, but with the social troubles of an Aspie, and you also look at not getting the diagnosis, intervention, or help, particularly with women, with girls, because I bet you girls, what we do know is that girls with undiagnosed autism are more prone to eating disorders. That's one way of coping. But when I went to like women's meetings for alcohol, I honestly, I think, and I'm not going to mention names here, but a couple of the women I've met there now self-identify as Aspie because of the journey I was going through. I pointed it out and shared about it in the groups, and I'm getting emotional. They were able to self-identify and discover it for themselves. And then there are a fair few other women in there that, seemed like they were questioning it but weren't ready to face it. An anxiety killer. It dumbs down, it numbs out, So I would think that autistic people would be particularly vulnerable to the downers. There's another couple of really important last points that I want to make before I get into a ramble about this. The first one is that I've talked about it in my What is a Savant, my Savant blog, and, but unidentified autistics who end up getting sucked into addiction. So addiction is a very, very powerful affliction, disease. And it's genetic, and, it's common. 1 in 10 people have alcoholism or are potential to develop alcoholism, including and not excluding people who are on the autism spectrum who have alcoholism in their families. So if they overcope with alcohol, they will develop a problem, and it's very difficult to get rid of that to conquer that problem. Any addiction, unfortunately, the rates of success are a lot lower than the rates of failure. That would probably be higher in a person with undiagnosed autism. Why? Because diagnostic tools suck for adults, and you can imagine that when somebody goes into recovery because they think that booze or another type of substance is their problem, and they go into recovery and they start getting social anxiety and sensory issues and all these other things, and they don't receive a diagnosis of autism, they're at a huge risk to go out and relapse again. They're not going to be met with help. They're going to go into these traditional recovery things, and it's going to seem like it's about their emotions, and they're just going to plateau in their recovery process. And it's not. Discovering my autism saved me from relapse. It saved me. I would have relapsed. I don't know. I needed to know. I stopping my medicating was the, like, I don't really like to talk about this, but reading this article, as much as the rest of it was really good and I liked it, that particular part of the article sort of fired me up just a little bit, and I want to say more about it, but I'm even reluctant in making this video right now because I still don't want anyone to associate my past with who I am, because it wasn't who I am at all. And it actually stole me. My coping mechanisms completely hijacked my soul. But so that's the first point we made, and I went on another ramble. The second part is that it's saying, well, like, autistics are less likely to be addicted. Well, first of all, they're more likely to relapse. So how do we know? How do we know they're more likely to relapse? They go into recovery and relapse and go back out before you discover the autism and point it out that was the issue in the first place. A, and B, if we already have these sensitive health issues, particularly pancreatic, diabetes, I got to tell you something. I royally screwed up my pancreas with alcohol. I now have to eat this ridiculous diet. I have severe reactive hypoglycemia bordering on diabetes. I have diabetic level blood sugars. I'm slim. I'm 28, and I get diabetic level blood sugars and monitor my blood sugar. And that's because of the predisposition to it and the coping mechanism that I pushed. So, autistic people don't get identified because they try to recover and they are likely to relapse. A and B, they just die. Addiction is a killer, and the people who are most likely to die are obviously the people who are the most sensitive. And so, sadly, I bet you a lot of Audi addicts die in their sleep or whatever. And we're too sensitive.